Hello and welcome to the latest video on my top 1000 countdown. So on this video we're going numbers 420 to 411. So let's go to fighter number 420 now. Okay, that fighter is tough contender Carl Tremayne. Now Carl Tremayne, okay, beat 5 world champions. He fought 77 rounds against champions, and he beat 3 individual Hall of Famers, fighting 80 rounds against Hall of Famers overall. Carl Tremayne had a total of 18 fights against rated fighters, and he scored 20 knockouts in his career, 8 in 3 rounds or less and 3 in the first round. Now Carl Tremayne was top 10 rated for a total of 2 years, and the longest unbeaten run in his career was an unbeaten run of 20 fights in total. Now Carl Tremayne was pound for pound rated for 0 years, and he had 4 fights against pound for pounders, scoring 1 win. He scored 0 wins against pound for pound top 3 fighters and 0 wins against pound for pound number 1 rated fighters. And Carl Tremayne's opposition fought rate comes in at 5 from 18, and his opposition beat rate is 3 from 13. So Carl Tremayne, okay, had 9 fights against champions. Okay, that includes 5 wins, 3 losses, 1 draw with 2 knockouts. He had 8 fights against Hall of Famers, including 5 wins, 3 losses, no draws with 0 knockouts. And Carl Tremayne had 0 world title fights. So, from Carl Tremayne in 420, we'll go down to fighter 419, okay, and that fighter is Emil the Spider Pladner. Now, Emil Pladner, okay, beat 3 world champions. He fought 61 rounds against champions, and Pladner beat 2 Hall of Fame fighters, fighting 21 rounds against Hall of Famers overall. Pladner had a total of 30 fights against rated fighters, and he scored a total of 38 knockouts, okay, 4 knockouts in 3 rounds or less, and 2 knockouts in the first round. And Emil Pladner was top 10 rated for a total of 3 years. Now his longest unbeaten run was a run of 28 fights, and he was pound for pound rated for 0 years. Now Pladner did have 2 fights against pound for pounders, scoring no wins in the 3 pound for pound categories, and his opposition fought rate comes in at 5 from 18, and his opposition beat rate was 4 from 13. So Pladner had 9 fights against champions, including 3 wins, 5 loss, 1 draw with 1 knockout. He had 5 fights against Hall of Famers, including 2 wins, 3 losses, no draws with 1 knockout. And Pladner had 3 world title fights, including 1 win with 2 defeats and 0 title defences. So there's Emil Pladner in 419. Fighter 418, okay, is Len Wickwar, who had hundreds of fights and has a terrible resume. Len Wickwar beat 1 world champion. He fought 32 rounds against champions. He beat no Hall of Fame fighters, fighting 18 rounds against Hall of Famers overall. And Len Wickwar had 6 fights against rated fighters. Now Wickwar scored 94 knockouts, okay, 30 knockouts in 3 rounds or less, and 8 knockouts in the first round. Wickwar was top 10 rated for 0 years, and the longest unbeaten run in his career was an unbeaten run of 23 fights. Wickwar was never pound for pound rated in my all-time rankings, and he had 2 fights against pound for pounders, scoring no wins in the 3 pound for pound categories. And despite all those fights, his opposition fought rate is 5 from 18, which some of the fighters in careers a third his size have actually matched, indicating how good his resume was. 5 from 18, and his opposition beat rate was 2 from 13. So Wickwar had 4 fights against champions, including 2 wins, 2 loss, no draw with 0 knockouts. He had 2 fights against Hall of Famers, both of them are defeats, and he had 0 world title fights. So on to our next fighter, okay, tough middleweight contender and welterweight Jack McVeigh. Now Jack McVeigh, okay, beat 1 world champion. He fought 80 rounds against champions, and he beat no Hall of Fame fighters, fighting 40 rounds against Hall of Famers overall. Now Jack McVeigh had 37 fights against rated fighters, and he scored 29 knockouts in his career, 12 in 3 rounds or less, and 1 in the first round. McVeigh was top 10 rated as a fighter himself for 5 years, and the longest unbeaten run he had in his career was a run of 14 fights. Now he was never pound for pound rated himself in my all-time rankings. He did have 6 fights against pound for pounders, but scored no wins in the 3 pound for pound categories. And Jack McVeigh's opposition fought rate comes in at 6 from 18, and his opposition beat rate was 3 from 13. So 8 fights against champions McVeigh had. That included 2 wins, 5 loss, 1 draw with 1 knockout. He had 4 fights against Hall of Famers, including 0 wins, 3 losses, 1 draw with 0 knockouts, and he had 1 world title fight that was a defeat. So, on to our next fighter, okay, is another tough contender from his time, okay, who mixed in really tough company, Charlie McKeever. Now, Charlie McKeever, okay, beat 5 world champions individually. He fought 222 rounds against champions. And remember, in McKeever's time, there weren't even the original 8 weight divisions fully established via the lineal line, so he really mixed in good company. There weren't as many champions, and the champions often, a lot of them, would have large gaps in between fights, and sometimes fight lots of exhibitions instead of fighting, and all kinds of things went on depending on fighter in his career. But yeah, he fought in a tough time. So McKeever, okay, beat 3 Hall of Famers individually. He fought 146 rounds against Hall of Famers, and as a pre-rating era fighter, of course, he has 0 fights against rated opponents. Now McKeever scored 8 knockouts, okay, 6 in 3 rounds or less, and 1 in the first round, and he was top 10 rated for 0 years. McKeever's longest unbeaten run was a run of 18 fights, and he was pound for pound rated for 1 year. Now Charlie McKeever had 26 fights against pound for pounders alone. 26 fights against pound for pounders, scoring 9 wins. He scored 5 wins against pound for pound top 3 fighters, and 3 wins against former pound for pound number 1 fighters. And Charlie McKeever's opposition fought rate comes in at 4 from 18, and his opposition beat rate was 2 from 13. So McKeever had 22 fights against champions, including 6 wins, 11 losses, 5 draws with 0 knockouts. He had 14 fights against Hall of Famers, including 3 wins, 8 losses, 3 draw with 0 knockouts, and Charlie McKeever had 0 world title fights. So there's McKeever in 416. When we go to fight at 415, okay, it is Japanese fighter Kuniaki Shibata. Now Kuniaki Shibata beat 3 world champions, okay, fought 63 rounds against champions, and he beat 1 Hall of Famer individually, fighting 12 rounds against him. Now Shibata, okay, had 14 fights against rated fighters, and he scored a total, okay, of 25 knockouts. 13 knockouts were in 3 rounds or less, and 8 were in the first round. Shibata himself was top 10 rated for 7 years, and he had a longest unbeaten run of 21 fights. He was also rated in my all-time pound for pound rankings for 2 individual years. Now Shibata had 5 fights against pound for pounders, scoring 1 win. He scored 1 win against pound for pound top 3 fighters, and 0 wins against pound for pound number 1 fighters. And his opposition fought rate comes in at 2 from 18, and his opposition beat rate is 2 from 13. So Shibata had 7 fights against champions, including 3 wins, 3 loss, 1 draw with 1 knockout. He had 1 fight against a Hall of Famer that was a win with 1 knockout, and he had 12 world title fights, including 8 wins, 3 losses, 1 draw with 6 title defences. So there's Kuniaki Shibata in 415. Fighter number 414, okay, is Willie Fitzgerald. Willie Fitzgerald is from the era of Young Lowry's, Tim Callahan's, all these, Charlie McKeever. Tough contenders who were capable on the day of giving really good fighters very difficult fights. Not journeymen, okay, they were tough contenders. Willie Fitzgerald is one of those. He beat 3 world champions. He fought 88 rounds against champions. And Fitzgerald beat 1 Hall of Fame fighter individually, fighting 52 rounds against Hall of Famers overall. Now Fitzgerald had 0 fights against rated fighters, being a pre-rating era fighter, but he did score 36 knockouts, okay, 14 of them in 3 rounds or less, and 5 in the first round. Fitzgerald was top 10 rated himself for 0 years, obviously being pre-rating era, and his longest unbeaten run was a run of 18 fights. Now he was never pound for pound rated in my all-time rankings himself. He did have 13 fights against pound for pounders, scoring 3 wins. He scored 2 wins against pound for pound top 3 fighters, and 0 wins against pound for pound number 1 fighters. And Willie Fitzgerald's opposition fought rate comes in at 6 from 18, and his opposition beat rate was 3 from 13. So Fitzgerald had 11 fights against champions. That included 4 wins, 4 losses, 3 draw with 0 knockouts. He had 8 fights against Hall of Famers, including 2 wins, 3 losses, 3 draw with 0 knockouts, and he had 1 title fight that was a defeat. So onwards to the final 3. The first of those, fighter number 413, is power punching heavyweight Obi Walker, the former coloured heavyweight champion and feared heavyweight puncher of the 1930s. Now, Obi Walker beat one world champion, he fought 25 rounds against champions, and he beat one Hall of Fame fighter individually, fighting 10 rounds against him. Now, Obi Walker had 25 fights against rated opponents, and he scored a total of 59 knockouts, 30 of those knockouts were in 3 rounds or less, and 10 knockouts were in the first round. Now, Obi Walker was never top 10 rated, and I've always questioned that about why in the 30s he was never top 10 rated. I have some ideas, but no facts. His longest unbeaten run was a run of 31 fights, and he was pound for pound rated for 0 years. Obi Walker, interestingly, didn't have any fights against pound for pounders. He did fight a lot of tough fighters, but no fights against fighters rated in my pound for pound rankings. And his opposition fought rate comes in at 5 from 18, and Obi Walker's opposition beat rate is 3 from 13. So Walker had 2 fights against champions, including 1 win, 1 loss, no draw with no KOs. He had 1 fight against a Hall of Famer that was a win with 0 knockouts, and he had 2 title fights, including 1 win, 1 loss, no draw, and 0 title defences. One of their career highlights, aside from beating a more informed Tony Galento, who was a heavyweight contender at the time, beating him quite brutally, he also had that incredible fight series with fellow violent puncher, Violent Kid Elmer Ray. Both of those guys put on some absolute brawls where they were knocking the stuffing out of each other in a brutal fight series. Obi Walker winning some, Elmer Ray winning more of them later in the series, but one of the most brutal fight series of that period. So there's Obi Walker in 413. When we go to fight number 412, it is the exciting Bobby Chacon. Now, Bobby Chacon, beat 7 world champions. He fought 133 rounds against champions, and Chacon beat 2 Hall of Fame fighters, fighting 40 rounds against Hall of Famers overall. Chacon had 22 fights against rated fighters, and he scored a total of 47 knockouts, 16 knockouts in 3 rounds or less, and 5 knockouts in the first round. Now, Bobby Chacon was top 10 rated for a total of 10 years throughout his career. His longest unbeaten run was a run of 19 fights, and he was never pound for pound rated in my all-time rankings. Now, Chacon did have 7 fights against pound for pounders, scoring 4 wins. He scored 1 win against pound for pound top 3 fighter and 0 wins against pound for pound number 1 fighters. Good morning, Martin. Good to see you, buddy. You're going back to the start, buddy. Good stuff. Cheers, mate. Thank you. So his opposition fought rate comes in at 3 from 18, and his opposition beat rate was 2 from 13. So Chacon, had 15 fights against champions. That includes 8 wins, 6 losses, 1 draw with 4 knockouts. He had 6 fights against Hall of Famers, including 2 wins, 4 loss, no draw with 1 knockout. And Chacon had 7 world title fights, including 3 wins, 4 losses, no draws, whilst making 1 title defence. Exciting fighter he was, though, Bobby Chacon. Go watch him if you've never seen him. So on to our final fighter on this current video, fighter number 411, and it is a not well known fighter called Oakland Jimmy Duffy. Now, Oakland Jimmy Duffy beat 3 world champions. He fought 50 rounds against champions, and he beat 2 Hall of Fame fighters, fighting 24 rounds against Hall of Famers overall. And Jimmy Duffy, had 16 fights against rated fighters. He scored 20 knockouts in his career, 13 knockouts in 3 rounds or less, and 5 knockouts in the first round. Jimmy Duffy was never top 10 rated, fighting in that period from the non-rating to the rating era, and the longest unbeaten run in his career was a run of 45 fights. Now, Jimmy Duffy was never pound for pound rated himself. He did have 10 fights against pound for pounders, scoring 3 wins. He scored 2 wins against pound for pound top 3 fighters and 2 wins against pound for pound number 1 fighters. And Oakland Jimmy Duffy's opposition fought rate comes in at 7 from 18, and his opposition beat rate was 4 from 13. So Oakland Jimmy Duffy had 6 fights against champions, including 3 wins, 3 losses, no draws with 0 KOs. He had 5 fights against Hall of Famers, including 2 wins, 1 loss, 2 draw with 0 knockouts. And Oakland Jimmy Duffy never had a world title fight. So people, there's my latest video, 420 to 411, okay, coming tonight will be 410 to 401, which of course will signal 600 down and the top 400 to go. So that video will come this evening, so watch out for that. In the meantime, I'm going to get off and crack on with getting more of these videos ready as I push for the finish line. Oh, before I get off, big shout out to my buddy Random Acoustic Thoughts. Good to see you, mate. Hope you're really, really well as always. So there I am, okay, I have to crack off and crack on with more videos. As soon as the videos are all ready and I've got the 10 to 1 done, the video's done, I'm going to speed up production of videos. I'll do 2 some days, 3 some days, maybe 4 some days, but it'll then be time to power through the playlist to get it finished so I can get back on my career videos. Well, I have hundreds and hundreds to do. So, there's Oakland Jimmy Duffy. He ends this video. I'm the Boxing Librarian. I'm out for now.